Okay, good morning everybody, and Hazak Baruch. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Tuesday morning, right? We're up to Tuesday, okay. Tuesday morning, as we are studying together Perashat Vayera. And I would like to together today to jump to the end of our Perashah, of course, which is by far the highlight of our Perashah, and that is Akedat Yitzchak, the 10th test of Avraham Avinu. According to many, it's the 10th test, the 10th and final test of Avraham. And here we go, everybody, chapter 22, Pasuk 1. Vayhi ahar hadevarim ha'eleh. And it was after these things. Okay? It was after these things. We'll come back to that. After these things, Veha Elohim nisait Avraham. And God tests Avraham. Vayomer elav Avraham. Vayomer, and he says to Abraham, and Abraham says, here I am. He says, I want you to take your son, who your only one, who you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah, bring him up there as an offering upon one of the mountains, which I shall tell you. And we know how it plays out. Abraham wakes up early, he takes his son to the mountain, and he ends up passing the test, and all is well. Okay? Again, this is one of the 10 tests of Avraham. Just to go through some of them rather quickly. The test of being thrown into the fire is one of them. Leaving his lech lecha, leaving his family. Being forced to now leave the second he gets there, to leave Israel because there's a famine, and to go to Egypt. That was also a test in its own right. Paro taking Sarah. That was a test. Avraham going to battle to save and rescue Lot from the 4 kings. Okay? He had to do a Brit Milah at an advanced age. Okay, that was a test. Kicking out Ishmael was also a very, very big test. And finally, sacrificing Yitzchak. Again, these are some of the tests according to Rashi. Others have other tests. But we know Asara Nisyonot, overall, everyone agrees that he had 10 major tests. Okay? Major tests. Of course, every second of life is a test. But significant tests that helped him jump from one level to the next, and it's all based on Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot says in chapter 5, Asara Nisyonot Nitnasa Avraham Avinu. Okay, it's an important Mishnah. Really, we had a class Pirkei Avot that we studied beautifully, where we went through it, all of it, and so many beautiful lessons. In the 5th chapter, it says, Asara Nisyonot Nitnasa Avraham Avinu. Okay? 10 tests that Avraham had. Okay, fine. Now, what is, we translated the word already. But really, how do you translate that word? Vayhi ahara devrim ha'eleh veha Elohim nisa et Avraham. What does that word mean? Veha Elohim nisa et Avraham. And God, nisa. So the simplest one, and the translation that everyone follows, is that Nisa comes from the word Nisayon. Right? Nisayon is a test. That's usually how we translate it. God tested Abraham. Here's the problem with that word. What's the purpose of a test? Why do you give your children a test? Why does a teacher give their students a test? Why does anyone give anyone a test? They want to see if they can pass. I need to see if you know the information. I want to see if you're going to be able to do it. I don't know if you can do it, and I want to see, so I'm testing you, right? A driving test, because I want to see if you could drive. The problem is, Hashem knows already what we're going to do. Hashem knows what we're capable of doing. So what's the point? Why test someone if you already know that they know? If you already know what they can do? Yeah? It says in Pirkei Avot again, Hakol tzafui vehareshut netuna. We all have free will, but Hakol tzafui. That means that God sees everything. He knows what we're going to do. He knows what we're going to pick. He knows what we're going to choose. He knows the future. And if that's the case, then why is God testing Abraham if he knows what he's going to do? The word test is inappropriate. That's the question that the commentaries struggle with. And there are a few answers that I would like to share with you today. Answer number 1 is the Ramban Nachmanides. And the Ramban says, you're right, Nisayon is a test. And it wasn't a test though from the point of view of God, but from the point of view of Avraham. That's the test. You're right, God knows the answer, but man doesn't. Man himself doesn't know if he's capable of passing, because from our perspective, I may pass and I may fail. And therefore the word Nisayon is appropriate, even though from God's vantage point, it's not a test, because he knows what's going to happen. He's aware of the outcome. But from the point of view of the one being tested, it is a test. And therefore, that's why the word Nisayon is used. Okay? That's the Ramban. Write it down and hold on to it. We're going to come back. Rambam says that Nisayon, Ve'Elohim Nisa et Avraham, comes from a different word altogether. Nothing to do with the word test. The Rambam says, it says, V'nisa nes legoy merachok. A nes could also mean an emblem. A nes is like a sign. Yeah, it's a symbol. Right? The emblem of the United States is the bald eagle. It's a bald eagle. That's the sign. A nisa, according to this, is a sign. It's to show everyone who you are. Elohim nisa et Avraham. God was now portraying Avraham for everyone to see. Not God tested Avraham, but God was showing off Avraham, showcasing him. How do you showcase him? You showcase him by showing everyone what he's capable of. So God over here is raising Avraham, showing him to everyone to see. Okay? That's how he translates the word Nisa. Very interesting. Okay? The Radak agrees to this, but he just has one problem with the Rambam. And he asks a very, very interesting question. He was showing him off to whom? No one was there. No one went. No one knew. Sarah didn't know. Abraham went by himself, and even the two that he took with him, Shevu lachem po im hamor, stay here at the bottom of the mountain. I'm going to go with Isaac. We're going to just, go do a little bit yoga, meditation. We'll be back. So no one knew. So who are you raising Avraham to? In front of whose eyes are you raising him? That's the Radak's question. And he answers, very, very powerful answer. He answers that it was raising Avraham not in front of his contemporary, but to future generations. To us. To me and you. Elohim nisa et Avraham. For all those later generations that are going to come and read the Torah and believe in it and study what it says. To us, when we read about the Akedah, Avraham is raised in our eyes. Okay? So that's how the Radak explains. Okay? Continuing from the Rambam's explanation, that it means as a sign, but the sign was not for Abraham's contemporaries, rather for Abraham's descendants. Okay. These two opinions, I think many people already knew, but I'd like to share with you today a third opinion. Okay? Very, very controversial. Okay? And that is, of course, someone who's very, worth mentioning, a big scholar. Not that we have the right to question, these big rabbis. But today I would like to share with you the understanding of the Rashbam. Okay? The Rashbam, anyone know who the Rashbam was? The Rashbam was actually the grandson of Rashi. Okay? The Rashbam has commentary on the Talmud, on the Gemara, and he has commentary on the Torah. His commentary on the Torah, if I could just find it, sorry, not finding it now. Okay, here it is. Just to go to the Radak for a second. The Radak, let's to read it inside. he asks the question. No one knew, and even if Abraham said it, no one would believe him. And he says, "V'ha'emet ki hanisayon hazeh leharot lebnei olam ahavat Avraham hashlema v'lo na'aseh leotam hadorot ele ela ledorot habayim." The test wasn't for Abraham's generation; it was for future generations. Hama'aminim b'Torah shekatav Moshe Rabbeinu mepi ha'el, for those who believe in the divinity of the Torah that was given by God. Okay, so that's what the Radak's opinion was. Okay, coming back to the Rashbam. The Rashbam says as follows. And he begins actually going back before the word Nisa. He goes back to the word Vayhi Ahar Hadevarim Ha'ele. So with your permission today, let's study together a piece of this Rashbam. The Rashbam again was a grandson of Rashi. Rashi had one son-in-law, Meir. And the Rashbam is Rabbi Shmuel ben Meir. I believe that's what the Shin stands for, if I'm not mistaken. Please correct me if I am. But it's Rabbi Shmuel ben Meir, and that's what the Rashbam stands for. Okay, so this is Rashi's grandson. He grew up on Rashi. Maybe he learned Chumash with Rashi. He learned Chumash with the real Rashi. Okay, and this is what he has to say. Okay, Vayhi ahara devarim ha'ele, and it came after these events. It happened after these things. What does that mean? Ahara devarim ha'ele, after these things. Says the Rashbam, you should know, whenever you find this phrase in Tanakh, Achar hadevarim ha'ele, and it happened after these things, it's always el ha'perasha shelemala, to the thing right before it. Okay? Ahar hadevarim ha'ele, right before what was written right before. Okay, so what's written right before? As an example, he gives you a few examples. Ahar hadevarim ha'ele, sheharag Avraham ha'melachim, amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, al tira Avram min ha'omot. We found the phrase earlier. Vayhi achar hadevarim ha'ele. Right after Avraham defeated the 4 kings to rescue his nephew Lot. Okay, so let's just understand what he's saying. Let's jump back to last week's Perashah. It says in chapter 14 he defeated the 4 kings. Chapter 15 begins, Ahara devarim ha'ele, after these events, Hayad var Hashem el Avraham, b'machazeh, God came to Avraham in a dream. He says, Al tira, don't fear them. So the Rashbam says, you see, right after that Avraham defeated the 4 kings, he was afraid that the nations are going to now attack him. So God had to come and say, don't worry, they won't touch you. Okay. Another example. Vayhi ahara devarim ha'ele, shenolad Yitzchak, vayugad le'Avraham lemor, ubtuel yalad et Rivka. V'chen ahara devarim ha'ele shehegid Mordechai al bigtan vateresh. Another example is after Yitzchak was born. They told Avraham that, Rivka was born, so she's going to marry Yitzchak. And after in Megillat Esther, Vayhi ahara devarim ha'ele, right after these things, Achashverosh elevated Haman. After what things? Achashverosh elevated Haman. It always is connected to what happened right before. So says the Rashbam, Achara devarim ha'ele shehegid Mordechai. Right after these things, that Mordechai saved Achashverosh's life from the conspiracy of Bigtan Vateresh. Right after that, Gidal HaMelech Achashverosh et Haman. Achashverosh appointed Haman, who wanted to kill Mordechai and who was saved because of what he did by saving the king's life. So anyways, he's giving you 3 examples that Vayhi ahar hadevarim ha'ele means right after the things that we just spoke about. Says the Rashbam, so when it says in our Perashah by the Akedat Yitzchak, Vayhi achar hadevarim ha'ele, after these things, God tested Avraham. After what things? Says the Rashbam, turn the page back and see what things. What's written right before? Says the Rashbam, Shekarat Avraham Berit LaAvimelech. Right before is the episode where Avraham makes an alliance with Avimelech at Be'er Sheva. And he says, me and my grandson and my great-grandson, forever we have peace with you and your grandson, your great-grandson. And he gave him 7 sheep. And he made a peace treaty. And Abraham promised Avimelech that he'll leave him alone and he'll never harm him. Not him, not his grandsons. Says the Rashbam, Vechara apo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu al zot. Oh my gosh. And God was very angry for Abraham making such a pact, making this alliance. Why is God angry? Isn't peace good? Peace with your neighbors? He says, Shehare eretz Pelishtim nitan le'Avraham. The problem is that Avimelech lived in Pelishtim, let's say Gaza, and that was promised to Abraham. That's part of what your descendants are going to receive. וגם ביהושע מטילים על ערי 5 צרני פלישתים גורל. And God swore, לא תהיה כל נשמה. God said to Abraham, you need to kill every single one of them. But now you just made a peace treaty. You just made everything more complicated. Why'd you do that, Abraham? Why are you making peace with someone that I told you I'm going to give you his land? Lachen, therefore, veha Elohim nisa et Avraham. Therefore, says the Rashbam, unbelievable. God nisa et Avraham. What does nisa mean? To rebuke. Kintero vetziaro kedechtiv hanisa davar lecha tilaa. Says the Rashbam over here, it means that Hashem chastises Abraham. He causes him grief. Like it says in Job and Exodus and Psalms. The connotation is an unpleasant one for the one being subjected to it. In this instant, God, so to speak, indicated to Abraham that he had been foolish to think that he could guarantee Yitzchak and his descendants' well-being into the future. You're making peace treaties for 3 generations ahead. You may have to terminate his life before he even had produced any offspring at all who would be called upon to honor his father's deal with Avimelech. We find that the Ark of the Covenant spent 7 months in Pelishtim captivity. Says the Rashbam. We find as an example, he's going to bring you a proof from a Midrash now. He's going to bring you a proof that Abraham making a peace treaty with Avimelech was a mistake. The Midrash says, we know in the Tanakh that the Ark, the Aron, was taken for 7 months by the Pelishtim. And the Midrash says that's a result of Abraham having made such an unauthorized pact with Avimelech. The 7 months correspond to the 7 sheep Abraham had gratuitously given to Avimelech. God swore that as a result, the Pelishtim would fight 7 wars against the Israelites in which they would be victorious. These wars occurred during the time of Shimshon, Chofni, Pinchas, Shaul, and the 3 sons of Shaul who were killed. Another approach, as a result of Abraham's high-handed act, 7 altars were destroyed by the enemies of the Jewish people after they entered the Holy Land. The tabernacle, Gilgal, Nov, Shiloh, Givon, and the 2 temples. Altogether 7 temples were destroyed. This is all from the Midrash Shemuel. According to another version, God's Ark would repose in the land of Pelishtim for 7 months, like we just said. And all of this was because Avraham, look at this, Nidgaeta beben shenatati lecha. Are you so honored and cocky to start making peace treaties with this son of yours? Go ahead, put him on the altar and kill him. That's how the Rashbam understands the word Nisa. Not God tested and not God elevated. Rather, God rebuked. Don't start making treaties. Don't think it's your call now. Don't get arrogant. At the end of the day, God says, it's up to me what happens. Okay, again, definitely food for thought on this Rashbam. What I would like to just do right now is turn back to the answer of the Ramban and ask a very simple question. Okay? My question is like this. Because again, this is not the simple understanding. And even according to that, he ends up passing, and God comes down and says, okay, don't do it. I see that you're not conceited. You were willing to give up Yitzchak. You're not taking matters into your own hands. Either way, okay, the mainstream approach is that this is a very big test that Abraham ends up passing, and it's all credited to Abraham Avinu. Right? This is the test of Abraham. The question is, why is Yitzchak not get any credit over here? Let's not forget, okay, Yitzchak's a 37-year-old man according to the Midrash. Even not, he's 13. Your father says, come, I gotta take you somewhere. No. I'm in the middle of, building my career. You want me to go end it right now? But no one gives Yitzchak credit. Why is it called the test of Abraham? Why is it not called the test of Yitzchak? That's a question that we have to answer. And again, it's a test. If you're going with the Ramban's approach, it's a test for Yitzchak. If you're going with the Rambam, it's raising Yitzchak. But no one says that. Everyone gives the credit to Abraham. The question is why? There's a few answers to this question. Answer number one, Rav Elchanan Wasserman. Rav Elchanan Wasserman was a student of the Chafetz Chaim. And when the Chafetz Chaim was leaving Radin to go to Eretz Yisrael, they said to him, but Rabbi, who will lead us if you leave? And the Chafetz Chaim said, don't worry, I'm leaving Rav Elchanan Wasserman here. So he is a big scholar. And Hashem Yinkom Damav, he was killed by the Nazis in Mahshemam. And Rav Elchanan Wasserman says, he asks another question. What's the big deal of Agadah Yitzchak? I don't understand. Why is everyone making such a big deal? Hundreds and if not thousands of times in history, Jews have killed themselves for Hashem. Chana v'shiva baneha. Big deal. Hey, Abraham, you risk your life. What's the... Relax. Nothing new. Jews have been doing it from day one. Abraham's one of thousands. What's the big deal? He gives an answer. He says, an interesting answer. He says that everyone that gives up their life for Hashem is doing it thinking that and knowing and believing that they're going to earn Olam Haba instead. When Abraham risked his life, when Abraham did this, he had no idea. He thought, once Yitzchak dies, I have no offspring and I lose everything. That was the test of Abraham. Doing it, knowing you're not going to get any Olam Haba for it. And that's really what we spoke about so many times. We spoke about this last week. Motivation, what's our kavanah, incentivizing mitzvot, doing it for the Olam Haba, or even higher level, doing it purely because that's what Hashem wants. The Gaon Mevilna, there was a shortage of etrogim, and when he told his students to get him an etrog at all costs, they went out, they found the guy that had it. They said, we need the etrog. The guy said, I'm sorry, I'm not giving it to you. They said, please, it's for the Gaon Mevilna. We'll pay you whatever you want. The man said, the Gaon Mevilna, okay, I'm going to give you my etrog on one condition. They said, okay, name your price. He says, I don't want money. I want the rabbi's reward that you're going to get for shaking. And they had no choice. They accepted the deal. And when they went back and they told the rabbi started jumping with laughter and joy. He said, finally, for the first time in my life, I'll be able to say I did a mitzvah for no Olam Haba. And this is really why Abraham is in a league of his own. Because he does it thinking it's over. Okay, that's Rav Elchanan Wasserman's answer. Rabbi Isaac Bernstein, he answers based on the famous Mishnah that we actually just said a few minutes ago. The Mishnah says in the beginning of Pirkei Avot, Asara dorot menoach ve'ad. Anyone know? 10 generations from Adam to Noach, and 10 generations from Noach to Abraham. By the way, if you add that up, 10 from Adam to Noach, and then 10 from Noach to Abraham, 10 plus 10 is 20. Now count Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Levi, Levi, Kehat, Amram. Wait, we said Abraham. So Yitzchak, Yaakov, Levi, Kehat, Amram, Moshe. So from Abraham to Moshe is another 6. 10 and 6, 26. The Torah was given in the 26th generation. If you count on Shabbat, we say Shabbat morning before Baruch She'amar. Okay, let's open it up. We say Psalm number 136. We say Hodu l'Adonai ki tov ki le'olam chazdo. Hodu l'Elohei Elohim ki le'olam chazdo. Okay? Praise God, forever is His kindness. It says ki le'olam chazdo how many times in that chapter? Take a guess, right? 26. Okay? It says 26 times. 26 times it says ki le'olam chazdo. The world has been running on chesed for 26 generations till Moshe brought down the Torah. Okay, for 26 generations. So anyways, let's go back to our Mishnah. From Noach to Avraham is 10 generations. Now, Asara Nisyonot Nitnasa Avraham Avinu Alav Hashalom. Right after that it says that Avraham had 10 tests. But look how it calls him. It gives him a very nice title. Avraham Avinu Alav Hashalom. Right before, when it brought Avraham's name, when it says 10 generations from Noach to Avraham, it doesn't say Avraham Avinu Alav Hashalom. It just says 10 generations from Noach to Avraham, as if he's like a regular guy. And then, by the way, 10 tests Avraham Avinu had. Why call him over here Avinu? He wasn't Avinu before. Says Rav Chaim Volozhin, very famous Rav Chaim Volozhin. How is it that Jews throughout history have the ability to risk their lives for Hashem? How is it that Jews throughout history have such a love for Eretz Yisrael? How is it that Jews throughout history have such a belief in emunah, in unwavering faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu? The answer is because whatever Avraham did, the 10 tests that Avraham passed, every one of those tests that he passed, he instilled not only physical genes, but even spiritual genes into his descendants. Every one of us, you should know, every one of us have in our genes more love of Israel. In our genes, more love of Hashem. In our genes, easy readiness to die for Hashem. Where do we get that from? We get it from Avraham, because he did it. And so now it's inherited into us. Epigenetics. We all have it in us because Avraham did it. You need to know that. You don't have the same genes as other people. You have Avraham's genes in you. Avraham, Sarah, Yitzchak, all the avot, all the imahot, their genes are in us. And therefore, the Mishnah here says 10 tests nitnasa Avraham Avinu, because by passing those tests he inherited those qualities to us. So in a sense, he is our father. And here it matters that he's our father. Because of him passing, we now have them as well. Before, it didn't need to call him Avinu. It's irrelevant. 10 generations from Noach to Avraham. That's it. But now that it's telling us about the tests that he passed, those traits are inherited into us because we are his children. If that's the case, says Rabbi Bernstein, we have an answer to our question. What's the big deal that Avraham risked his life? So many people did it before. Yes, they did it because Avraham did it. They did it because Avinu. They inherited it. It's like praising someone, big deal. What's the big deal that you're rich? All your kids are also rich. Why do you think my kids are rich? They're rich because of me. The reason Chana gave up her life and her 7 kids was because she had it in her from Avraham. But who did Avraham have it from? Nobody. Avraham, this was all over from the beginning. This was fresh. And therefore, Avraham is the one that gets credit more than everyone else in history. If that's the case, we have an answer to our question. Why is Yitzchak not given credit for Akedat Yitzchak? The answer is because he doesn't deserve that much credit. Yitzchak was a son of Avraham. Avraham already jumped into the fiery furnace. It's in your genes, Yitzchak. It's not such a big deal. For Avraham, this was a new test. This was the test of... You may say, Rabbi, it's not a big deal because he already did it by the fire. What's he doing now extra? The extra now is that it's one thing to jump in the fire yourself, but to sacrifice one's child, that's even harder level. That's the highest level. And this never happened before, and therefore Avraham is a pioneer. This is the test of Avraham. Yitzchak, not such a pioneer. You already have it in you from your father, from Avraham Avinu. Okay. By the way, he explains beautifully a story in the Gemara. Anyone that studied Masechet Berachot should know the story. The Gemara tells us that one time the Romans were burning Rabbi Akiva to death. And as they were burning him, what did Rabbi Akiva do? He started yelling and screaming in pain, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Rabbi Akiva, being burned alive, screamed and he accepted upon himself the yoke of heaven. And his students said, even here, Rabbi, even now you're going to say Shema? And the rabbi said back, especially here. I waited my whole life for this pasuk. ואהבת את השם אלוקיך בכל לבבך, בכל נפשך, בכל מאודיך. Even if God takes your nefesh, even if God's taking your life away, even at that moment, you should be willing to give up your life for Him. Even at that moment, you should love Hashem with everything you have, as He's killing you to love Hashem. And says Rabbi Akiva, my whole life I'm waiting for this pasuk. Now as they're burning me, I could say Shema Yisrael. This is the end of the Gemara. And the question is, who in their right mind is waiting for that pasuk? Did any other rabbi in the Gemara ever wait for this pasuk? Hillel, Shammai, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, all the big rabbis. None of them are waiting to die so they can say Shema Yisrael. Why is Rabbi Akiva waiting to die? Didn't Rabbi Akiva know anyways that he has it in him? Whatever the avot did is inherited into the children. Rabbi Akiva should know that. They all knew that. They knew, we'll do it if we have to. Thousands of Jews did it and we're no different. If it ever needs to happen, we'll do it. Why Rabbi Akiva wait for it? The answer is, Rabbi Akiva knew that Avraham Avinu and whatever he did went into the children. But what Rabbi Akiva wasn't sure of is because maybe Rabbi Akiva, who is a convert, maybe he doesn't have that in him. Because he's not technically from Avraham. He said, my whole life, I don't know, do I have it in me? All the other Jews, they have it in them. They inherited it from Avraham Avinu. But what about me? I'm the son of converts. Until finally at this moment, Rabbi Akiva realized that any convert becomes immediately a descendant and a child with all the genes of Avraham Avinu. And now he says, I realize, Shema Yisrael, my whole life I'm waiting for this. This is what we've been waiting for. Beautiful, beautiful interpretation of the Gemara. Just move on. So that's one answer of why Yitzchak isn't given credit. Because it's in your genes. Your father already did it. You're not a pioneer in this sense. The Meshech Chochmah says, interesting answer, we can't call it the test of Yitzchak, because if we would, then Yitzchak and his descendants would all receive merit, including Esav. But we don't want to give Esav credit for this. So he says instead it's referred to as the test of Avraham. How does that help? Avraham also is the grandpa of Esav. Yeah, but to Avraham God says, Ki be Yitzchak ikare. A part of Isaac will be your offspring. And therefore, only the Yaakov and his children were the ones worthy of tapping into Akedat Yitzchak. Now you may say, well, that's not fair. Why shouldn't Esav tap in? But we all know that Esav and his lifestyle and his ways, the choices that he made, Avraham died at 175. Really, he should have died at 180. Like his son. Why did he die at 175? Hashem killed Avraham 5 years earlier when Esav started going off the path so that Avraham shouldn't see his son making these wrong choices. And therefore, Esav, your choices caused Avraham to die. Is it justifiable not to credit the Akedat Yitzchak, the test of Avraham, to your account? Doesn't make sense. Not justifiable. That's the answer of the Meshech Chochmah. And one final answer for today, then we'll stop. And that is the answer of Rabbi Isaac Bernstein himself. Rabbi Isaac Bernstein, Alav Shalom, he says, well, I have a separate question. Why is Nisayon only used here? God tested Avraham. Why didn't he use Vayelohim Nisat Avraham by Lech Lecha? Why didn't he use the term Nisa by Paro taking Sarah? He had 10 of them, 10 tests. The Torah should say 10 times Nisat Avraham. And he answers, because the ultimate test of a person is how did you prepare your kids to be when you leave. That's all that really matters. What you did in your lifetime is great. What you achieved is beautiful. But the ultimate test is how did you prepare your kids? How did you leave them off? Are they going to continue in your path of Torah and mitzvot and Judaism? Because if you're righteous, but your kids are not, then you haven't fully succeeded. To be a successful Jew, one has to be themselves and then pass it on to their kids. And so it's only over here that Avraham is not the test on himself. The test is not so much how did he perform. The test really, says Rabbi Bernstein, is what will Yitzchak's reaction be when you tell him, I'm taking you. Did you prepare your child for 37 years to be able to do this test, to pass, to give up your life? That's the test that goes back to the father. When you want to know if the father succeeded, look how well he prepared his children. The test here, whether Yitzchak passes or not, that's the real test of Avraham. When Yitzchak is ready to run and to sacrifice his life, we know that the parents did a good job in preparing him to live a life of Torah and mitzvot. And therefore, this is Avraham's test. None of the other tests did that. All the other tests were how he himself performed. How you do is good, it's important. But how do your kids perform? That's even more important. And therefore, if we're learning, it's very nice. Are our kids learning? If we're keeping kosher, that's beautiful. Are our kids keeping kosher? That's the real test of a Jew. Of course, we can't control our kids. They have free will. They make their own choices. But are we doing everything that we can to ensure that they get the proper education, that they are instilled with love, fear, awe of Torah, of Hashem, of mitzvot? And that's why this is Avraham's test. This is not Yitzchak's test. Yitzchak's test will be later on when we see how does Yaakov and Esav perform. That will be Yitzchak's test. But the test of the Akedah was based on how the child performs. We now know how well the father prepared him. Okay, I think these are some nice thoughts from our parasha for the Akedat Yitzchak. We'll stop over here. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.